Dwight Eisenhower once said, "This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children." Keep this in mind as we discuss today the upcoming defense budget and why you need to know. My name is Dr. David Oualaalou.
And my name is Dr. Ross Stewart.
And you are watching Geopolitics in Conflict.
We'd like to thank those of you who are participating with us. We're so impressed by the intelligence of the ongoing conversation online that we're having with folks.
Well, indeed, Ross, there are some interesting comments that I've noticed and you noticed also, and we couldn't thank our viewers for that, and we thank you personally for that. As you know, we wanted to grow this channel bigger, and we wanted to reach a larger audience in order to raise awareness for really issues that matter the most to you, your family, and your financial well-being. So, thank you for that.
As you know, David, there's a lot of conversation going on in Congress right now about the defense budget. And there's a lot of fire going back and forth in this thing. What would you say that America is really known for?
Well, let's start with Disney World. How about that?
Number one.
Yeah, let's start with incarceration rate.
Number one in the world.
Yeah, how about the increased number of poverty that is right now we are witnessing?
Shocking.
And the main one is the massive defense spending.
The budget last year was between $704 and $708 billion. And there's some talk now about it going even bigger. What do you think the impact is overall of that kind of a budget?
Well, first of all, just for you to know, the Biden administration has requested about $753 billion for the entire defense spending. Part of that, which is about $10 billion or so, is going to go to the Pentagon, and the rest is going to go to some pet projects. And we're going to have a link for you at the bottom of the description so for you to get an idea about what those numbers mean. Well, it is astronomical. I mean, we can't wrap our heads around those numbers. And you'll think in terms of why the defense spending keeps going up.
Especially when the context is the United States spends more money on war and national defense than the next 10 countries put together.
Well, that's correct. Actually, if you consider some members of NATO, you can bind NATO all together. They won't, without the U.S., they won't even reach half of what the United States is spending on its defense budget. So the reason why we decided to bring this issue up for you to know what's going on is because we are noticing this spending has to sort of have some reason to why it is going at that level at the expense of other issues are here, where the money can be spent on.
What do you think the money could be diverted to that would actually serve the American people?
Well, you think, for example, of infrastructure. You know, you can, yes, we heard about the Biden administration thinking about a $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, but only about a fraction of that's going to infrastructure. You think about issues like education, for example.
And the enormous college debt that people have.
Yeah, you think about homelessness, that it's increasing right now in the United States. You think about poverty that is going up. All those require funding that if we are to take some from the military spending, we can allocate that towards dealing with those issues, because those issues will impact you, I, Ross, all of us. So some of us here in the U.S. thinking, oh, that has nothing to do with me. It has to do everything with you, because the more spending the government spends on stuff that have nothing to do with you, the less likely you will be able to improve your economic conditions.
You know, there's so many questions to raise with this. The first is, what benefit is there to America of having a $7.5 billion defense budget, and then the next is who benefits from that? Do the American people benefit, or who actually does benefit? And what's the impact on the rest of the world?
Well, those are great questions, Ross, and rightly so needs to be asked. Unfortunately, policymakers sort of kind of dance around those. They won't answer those kind of questions directly. Well, here is the hard truth. And the hard truth is that the military spending here in the U.S. is controlled not by the government, but rather by the private sector. They are when I used to work in Washington, D.C. back then, they are what we called the Big Four. The Big Four, those are the private contractors that really controls the defense spending, including Lockheed Martin, including Raytheon, including SAIC, and including Northrop Grumman. Those are, we're not pointing fingers here. All we are saying is that this is where that massive defense spending comes from. Because it's like what happened last time when the Pentagon released the yearly report about the naval assets of other countries, mainly China. Well, the first sentence on the report, it says that China now is the biggest navy in the world. When you and I know that is not true. That is not true. The reason why it was said, because it has to be justified that way, so Congress can allocate more money for the Navy to build more assets, if you will.
Let me play with a little bit of sarcasm.
Sure.
Well, why doesn't President Biden just straighten this whole mess out? Isn't he all powerful?
No, American president has no power. Most Americans do not realize that. It's the private sector behind the scenes that decides on all this. But let us just talk briefly about if we are, let's say we were given the authority for one day. They'll say, Ross, David, can you guys think of where can we spend the money?
Oh, good question. What do you think of homelessness?
Well, that will be the perfect thing, because the increase in numbers, as a matter of fact, I just read this morning about, and we're going to post a link to this, that California now is the third after Hawaii and New York when it comes down to homelessness. It's going up massively. They're about up to 537,000 homeless people
outrageous.
in America. This is the richest nation on earth. And yet, if you drive in certain areas in LA or New York or Hawaii, you'll see people sleeping in the streets.
I saw tents on the way from where I live to here this morning.
It is sad. We're not pointing fingers here. We are bringing up the issues so we all can think of ways to improve the conditions.
What's the organization that did the $24 million would solve it? Or some small number.
I forgot the name of it, but it was $20 billion.
$20 billion,
Yeah.
that's correct.
And
that's
their
correct.
argument was, as of today, the United States government spends about up to $3 billion on certain programs pertaining to homelessness.
A year?
A year. But that
$3
never
billion.
solved the issue.
Right.
Yeah. And this entity basically argued that if you put upfront $20 billion, you can eradicate homelessness altogether in the United States. Now, when you do the math, it makes perfect sense.
7 years is paid for.
Exactly, Ross. But because of the bickering inside Washington, because of the interests, special interest groups and so forth, they're not going to want to see this issue resolved.
Well, what about universal health care? I mean, that's
another...
Some people think that's controversial. We're the only major power in the world that doesn't have universal health care for its people.
That's correct. And that is a major issue that nobody, when I say nobody, I'm referring to no politicians, even though, I'll take this back, even though, funny enough that I found out that politicians, from both parties, agreed on reform healthcare.
And it didn't happen.
It didn't happen because of the private interest groups that's pushing the insurance industry and so forth. They won't want that to happen.
Well, if it goes to $750 billion, it's no small wonder that the United States has the reputation of exporting war.
Exactly. Well, here is the thing about healthcare. For healthcare, the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, conducted a research, a study, where they presented some scenarios, like 3 or 4 scenarios.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and each one of them, and we will have a link to all that for you guys, to see the numbers. And what they found that there are 4 programs, each one of them with a price tag.
Right.
The highest expensive one was about $290 billion.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but we will save the United States about $300 billion in healthcare savings.
So, okay, now it makes monetary sense.
Yeah.
Even the outrageously expensive one.
Yeah, but you take that number and you add the $20 billion for the homelessness, when you add it to that, and you still didn't even reach half of the budget of the Defense Department. So you can just see where the issues were, why some entities within Washington are not willing to take that steps and reform the healthcare that you and your family and all of us can benefit from. We're not saying here that just hand things to people. That is not what we are advocating
Not at all,
for.
not ever.
And we will not. Because there are some hard dollar earned by Americans who work over 45 hours a week only to see the United States government takes away from their taxes and giving it away for some other stuff that have nothing to do with them. It is a reality that you need to understand because it impacts the bottom line, your pocket.
You know, we take a look at all of our Congress people, and they're supporting this kind of big military budget. How come you think they do that?
Well, they do because the defense industry, the private industry sector, that some of them are located within their own states. You know, they have to bring the bacon home. So the projects have to go to their states where they are. And here is another thing while I'm thinking about it, Ross, that is looming large right now regarding this defense budget. And it has to do with Afghanistan. Believe it or not. Some of us might say, what this has to do with Afghanistan? A lot. And here is the issue.
Well, you've been there, right?
That is correct. I spent a couple of years actually back and forth in Afghanistan. Here is where the issue is. The issue is that the United States has agreed to pull all its forces from Afghanistan by May 1st.
Good luck. It's now May 5th or 6th.
Yeah, we surpassed that deadline. And why is that important? It's because the Pentagon has so many contractors in Afghanistan that they signed the contract prior to establishing the withdrawal deadline. Which means what? If they are withdrawn, they're going to file a lawsuit and the Pentagon will have to pay up, which will be a massive amount of money. So you can just see where the waste is. And yet we are going up with the increase of the defense budget beyond what we ever need.
For those who are participating with us, what message would you give them about this, about the military budget?
Well, you have to understand why the military defense budget will only go up. It will never go down. Why? Because of the special interest groups that are pushing from behind the scenes, but also because the need for all of us to understand that conflict is what makes the industry survive. So in other words, the more conflicts we create, the more weapons we sell. That's why we will never end in this vicious cycle of conflict after another. I mean, you look at it no further than what's going right now. Who the enemies are?
Russia,
China. So you can just see why we're pushing that agenda towards that one. So that's where.
And then we see their budgets going up as they create these horrific weapons.
Exactly. And
where do they aim them?
Yeah.
Where do they aim those things?
And yet, average Americans are not seeing their wages going up. So,
let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other videos. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
and as always, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.